Vincent Vito Marino's life was steeped in shadows from the very beginning. Born in the gritty streets of Providence, Rhode Island, in the early 1940s, he was the product of a violent and unforgiving world. His father, a low-level enforcer for the local mafia, was a brutal man who ruled their household with an iron fist. Vito learned early on that survival meant understanding the language of violence and power. His mother, a timid woman broken by years of abuse, offered little refuge from the chaos that defined his childhood. By the age of 12, Vito was already running errands for his father's associates, learning the dark trade of extortion and intimidation. He quickly developed a reputation for his cold, calculating demeanor and his willingness to do whatever it took to get the job done. It wasn't long before he was invited to participate in more significant operations. By 15, he had committed his first murder, a rival gang member who had crossed his father's boss. The killing was brutal, a message delivered with terrifying clarity, and it cemented Vito's place within the criminal underworld. In his late teens, Vito's father was killed in a violent turf war, leaving him to fend for himself. Rather than retreat, Vito saw this as an opportunity to rise. He allied himself with Carlo the Butcher Rossi and Salvatore Sal Ricci, two young men who shared his ruthless ambition. Together, they formed a trio that would become infamous in Rhode Island's criminal circles. Their operations expanded rapidly, moving from simple extortion to drug trafficking, gun running, and contract killings. Vito's strategic mind and unflinching brutality earned him the moniker the Wolf, a predator who always found his prey. The trio's rise to power was marked by a series of bloody confrontations with rival gangs. Vito orchestrated these conflicts with surgical precision, using fear and intimidation to dismantle his enemies piece by piece. One particularly gruesome event involved the massacre of a rival gang during a supposed truce meeting. Vito's men stormed the warehouse, leaving no survivors. The message was clear. Crossing Vito Marino meant certain death. His reign of terror extended beyond the criminal underworld, impacting the local community, which lived in constant fear of his wrath. Vito's personal life was as dark as his professional one. He married young to a woman named Maria who believed she could change him. Her hope was short-lived. Vito's violent tendencies spilled over into their home. The couple had 2 children, but Vito's brutality alienated them. Maria eventually left, taking the children with her. The separation only fueled Vito's descent into further darkness. He drowned his sorrows in blood and money, solidifying his empire and eradicating any semblance of the man he might once have been. By the late 1980s, Vito had become a legend in Rhode Island's underworld. His operations were vast and varied, but they were also beginning to attract unwanted attention. The federal government launched an extensive investigation into his activities, aiming to dismantle his criminal network. Vito responded with characteristic ruthlessness, bribing officials and eliminating informants. His paranoia grew, and he became more reclusive, trusting only Carlo and Sal. The trio's bond was unbreakable, forged in blood and cemented by mutual respect for their shared darkness. In the early 2000s, as Vito aged, he began to see the cracks in his empire. The younger generation of criminals was more reckless, less disciplined. The streets of Rhode Island were descending into chaos, and Vito's control was slipping. It was then that he conceived the idea of the Guardians, a shadow police force that would regulate the criminal activities he once ruled directly. This was his attempt to impose order, to leave a legacy that transcended mere violence. He envisioned a system where crime was controlled, predictable, and ultimately profitable for those who adhered to the rules. The formation of the Guardians marked a new chapter in Vito's life. He, Carlo, and Sal recruited their most trusted men, former enforcers, and even disillusioned ex-cops to create a clandestine organization that would enforce their own brand of justice. Vito's strategic brilliance was instrumental in crafting the Guardians' code of conduct: no unnecessary violence, transparency in transactions, and protection for those who followed the rules. This code was enforced with an iron fist, and those who violated it were met with swift and brutal consequences. Vito's final years were spent in the shadows, orchestrating the Guardians' operations from behind the scenes. His health declined, but his mind remained sharp, a dark beacon guiding the organization he had built. He watched, with a mix of pride and grim satisfaction, as the Guardians grew in power, extending their influence beyond Rhode Island. Vito's vision of controlled crime had become a reality, and he relished the fear and respect it commanded. Yet, beneath this satisfaction lay a deep, unspoken regret for the life he had led and the monstrous legacy he would leave behind. Vincent Vito Marino died in his bed, an old man with the blood of countless lives on his hands. His death was not mourned by the public, but within the shadows of the underworld, his passing marked the end of an era. The Guardians continued to thrive, a testament to his dark genius and ruthless ambition. Vito Marino's life story is a chilling saga of power, violence and control, a stark reminder of how deeply darkness can root itself in the human soul, transforming a boy from Providence into a legend of fear and brutality.